All right, welcome everyone, and welcome to the new normal, as we call it, here in the education sector. I know, let me just try to get this. All right. Well, I think this is a very familiar screen that most of us have been used to facing it probably sometimes once, twice, thrice a day. And I think what's interesting about this is that probably I'm assuming that 2 months ago, a vast majority of us never used Zoom. I mean, like we used to go for physical meetings and we used to go for physical conferences, do networking, give our business cards. And we were never really looking at coming for webinars. There were a lot of webinars I was invited to last year, but as a panelist, but I never used to attend. I mean, I thought like, let me meet people face to face. But suddenly, because we're forced to be at home, we've changed our behavior. Now, when you talk about the new normal, we have to ask ourselves a question: is that does this behavior change permanently or is it temporary? Let me take a step back and let's talk a bit about the September 11 attacks, which happened in the US and that focus on the war on terror in the early 2000s. It was another major world changing event because even after Osama bin Laden was killed, Al Qaeda sort of was not as prominent as it was. People's attitude to security changed. We are now used to the new normal of going to airports 3 hours in advance, standing in long security lines. We have to show not take any liquids in our handbags. Everything, go to hotels, you're scanned, go to buildings, you're scanned. You are used to the new normal. Because the thing is that one major event has changed you even after the event is over. Your attitude and your focus has changed. Our attitude and focus has changed on security. Today, our attitude and focus is now focused on personal health and social distancing and the concern that we may be infected if we go to a public place. Now, even after the COVID pandemic dies away, you're going to see these changes happening. But let me just talk a bit about what's happening right now. Even though a lot of us are talking about schools and colleges and all basically having online teaching, the thing is, the problem is that almost 43% of people who have their kids or are students themselves say they don't have the right equipment to deal with online education. The thing is that they may have a phone, and I know this because our own colleges and schools, we've gone on to teaching our courses online. But the problem again is that it may sound great from our side that we have all the networks and we have all our teachers changing their mindset to teaching online. But we have a large majority of students who don't have good quality phones or they have bad quality internet connectivity. And there's a lot of disturbance which makes their life difficult. So moving to this new pure online model is also taking time in terms of there's a digital divide between people who have the technology and people who don't have the technology. But let's talk about some of the other aspects, what's happening. Like let's talk about, some of you may have read the news that international colleges, a lot of students are suing these global colleges and saying that, look, we want our fees back or part of our fees refunded, because if you go to, let's say, Harvard and pay $55,000, and if Harvard's saying, okay, you pay $55,000, but you're not going to have classes, you're not going to have the interactivity, you're not going to meet your other students, you won't have the parties, you won't have the sports, then students are asking the question is, why should we pay $55,000 for that year? You're still teaching me, but I want to refund a part of my fees. A lot of students in India are asking the question is that if there's no physical experience in college, why should we go abroad and take part in that college? Because a key component of college internationally is that experience of dealing with people from other countries, a new environment, there's a certain immersive experience that you will not get through a Zoom lecture. So that's what's happening in international colleges. Let's talk even a bit about globally, what are educational organizations facing? So you look at the left side, you say that the short-term impact, a large number of educational organizations are seeing, you see all the reds on the left-hand side, you see that most of them feel that they will be worse or substantially worse in the short term. In the long term, majority will still be slightly worse or slightly better, but even then they're not as optimistic as we'd like to feel. So there is a crisis, there's no question about it. However, this is a Chinese character for crisis. It's called Weiji, and the Chinese word for crisis has two components: the component for danger and the component for opportunity. So when we look at the crisis that we call the COVID lockdown, the COVID pandemic, there's also an opportunity. So let's talk a bit about that opportunity. What is actually going to be the new normal? Because as I said, when you looked at the 9/11 attacks in America, there was a huge opportunity for companies who are in the security business, in the people safety business who actually saw a huge jump in their business. They had like their more security cameras, more scanning devices, things like that, which were never needed before 2001. What is the opportunity with the new normal, with the change behavior that we're going to see post-pandemic? Okay, this is a Chinese classroom with a school that just recently opened. And as you can see, is that it's not crowded with students. There's social distancing. That means that even after the pandemic is over, people, and forget about the fact that the vaccine may or may not happen in 1 year, 18 months, 24 months. The point is that a certain fear that people have, especially parents with their kids, is that I don't want my kid to come into a classroom where there are 50 other kids crowded together because I'm concerned about them being sort of infected. So every school and college will be forced to say that if I've got a classroom capacity of 60 students, I can't fit in probably not more than 15 or 20 students with at least 6 feet different distance between each of them, so that there's no so there's no close contact and there's social distancing. But you need to understand one thing is that you have the college or the school has limited infrastructure. That means that where they could probably hold around maybe 500 students in one building, they now have to fit in 50 students. That means obviously the other 450 students can't disappear. They will have to start doing things like, along with social distancing, start staggering the classes. Maybe you'll have things like you'll have staggered classroom where like some classes will be taken early in the morning, some will be taken in the afternoon. You may have some classes being taken on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and some be taken on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The problem is that you still have the school term, which is the same length, but you have to find ways to teach all the students in with less time spent in class. All right. Now that's going to change schools a lot, right, to a great extent. And that will be same in colleges. Now that means that a lot of schools, and this is quite interesting, is that education for the longest time has been the least disruptable industry. You talk about, let's say, even if you talk about 2018, 2019, there was the media industry, the food industry, finance industry, all were disrupted by fintech, food tech, delivery tech, and all that stuff. Education was happy using the same systems that they were using for the last 200 years. I mean, the classic model was students all come in class, they sit listening to a lecturer, and they finish the class and they go for the next lecture and the third lecture and the fourth lecture. It was basically the whole process. At the end, you studied and you had your exams, and that's it. It didn't change for the last 200 years. Or the only technology that was added in those days was maybe they have like a whiteboard instead of a blackboard, or now they had PowerPoint instead of, let's say, whiteboards. But the thing is that the lecture basically was the student sits down and listens to information being given by the lecturer. Now what has happened, because you cannot, schools and colleges do not have the, the luxury of having 50 people in the class. They now have to start looking at new methods of education. And this is something, for example, the flipped classroom. The flipped classroom model is something that requires students to be at home, study in advance for the classroom. That means, for example, like let's say they have to learn Newton's second law of motion. They will maybe look at an animation on Newton's second law of motion. There may be a, let's say, a recorded lecture or something that they see on their mobile phone or their laptop. They prepare the content in advance. Then with the understanding of the content, they come to class and then they'll have a project on Newton's second law of motion. They may discuss it in smaller groups of, let's say, 5, 10 people, where they are sitting separately from each other, but there are less people in the classroom and they're managing that. What happens is that instead of having a day-long, let's say 6-hour set of lectures in class, you would have students study the content online or before the classroom. They come in for the short interactive session, which may not last more than half an hour, 1 hour. That means that the same amount of content can be done within 2-3 hours across the whole day. That means the amount of time a student spends in class is much less than what they learn outside. And they can do projects, they can ask questions to their professors online, they can ask questions on WhatsApp. A lot of the interactivity that they would have in class, they're having outside of class. So I believe that the flipped classroom model is going to get more and more prevalent even after the colleges and schools open and we roll out education. And I believe that this is going to be the new normal for schools and colleges. Now that means that even when you look at synchronous or asynchronous learning, you need to ask yourself, what are the two methods of learning? Now, each of these have opportunities for education technology companies. Let's talk about this. Synchronous learning means that students will all come together at the same time for online class, like a classic live Zoom class. The teacher is there. The teacher will, let's say, give the lecture, give the talk. The students are there listening and they're asking questions live. There may be live chats, there may be instant messaging going on. But once the lecture is over, the lecture is over. They all come at the same time and they all end the lecture at the same time. That is synchronous. They all learn synchronously. Asynchronously, it means that basically the student will read the content beforehand. Maybe they will access a pre-recorded video on a YouTube or the learning management system of the college. They may actually see a pre-recorded, let's say, some sort of animation or something provided by an EdTech company. They may have a discussion forum where they're posting messages on a group and answering and asking questions. The faculty is giving them assignments to complete where they're uploading their answers on the learning management system. And they're sort of reading articles. That is at their own time. I mean, some student can do it at 12 o'clock at night, one student can do it 7 o'clock in the morning, but the point is asynchronous. They're not there at the same time. That means for EdTech companies, synchronous learning means people who are providing learning platforms that provide video or like live classes have a chance of actually getting access to the synchronous learning where students are looking for synchronous learning. There's an opportunity for EdTech companies there. Asynchronous learning is more like when you are, let's say, a provider of education content, curriculum content, things like, let's say, pre-recorded videos. Why do you need to get the video of, let's say, Professor Sharma in your school when you can actually get, let's say, one of the top professors of MIT teaching you Newton's second law of motion on a pre-recorded video? You don't have to limit yourself to your own professors in your college. That means that you can get access to content from anywhere. And again, EdTech companies that can provide that content in a structured format would also have a chance to interact. But that is just an example of what would happen with synchronous and asynchronous learning and what the opportunities are. But let's talk about, let's say, what's happening currently. The thing is that, as you can see, you already know this, is that Zoom is being downloaded. I think there are roughly 62 million downloads of Zoom in the last week. The numbers have come out. You have many more students signing up for online classes. People are signing for online courses like Skilling and Upgrad, where they learn new programming languages, they learn new things, new skills to upgrade themselves. The point is people are getting more and more used to learning content online. But agreed. So now we know that's the new normal. The new normal is basically people will be using pure online learning or blended learning, flipped classroom, where there's some online, some offline. But the point is that for all EdTech companies in this space, what is the opportunity? Now, this is the EdTech market map that you can see, which talks about education technology companies globally, what the opportunity, how they're divided into different sections. Now, obviously, all EdTech is not the same. Same way like in finance, someone who's a bank and let's say an NBFC are slightly different. So let's look at the EdTech market map and let's talk about the actual opportunities for EdTech companies in each space. Now, if you are in an EdTech company or looking at education technology, figure out where you fit into this map and what the opportunity is, right? So let's start from the left-hand side, the learning management systems. These are basically the complete platforms that schools and colleges will incorporate into their own system. And they'll be all-in-one platforms. That means that they can have discussion forums, they can have places to upload their assignments, you can do exams on them, you can have live videos, synchronous learning, you can have asynchronous videos happening. So these are when you are a very advanced institution, you incorporate a complete learning management system. All of it is done at the same time. The most popular ones being, let's say, Moodle and Blackboard. Now, learning management systems at the moment are a little more advanced. So schools who are currently, and colleges are currently adapting to Zoom and free options like Google Classroom, they're already happy dealing with those two things. It'll take a bit of time for them to start incorporating learning management systems into their pedagogy. So the learning management system companies may get a benefit, but over a slightly longer period of time, not immediately. Moving next to early childhood education, these are again these little content providers that help preschools and younger kids to actually learn concepts. Again, there may be a little bump to them, but the thing is that preschools tend to be more experiential. So it will take a bit of time for the early childhood education guys to get a lot more content provided to these parents and their kids. There will be a bump for them as well. There'll be an upscale for them, but not as much. The broad online learning platforms like, let's say, Educard, Udemy, Coursera, which are providing online courses, they, I think, will get a decent rise in business, because what will happen is that as people are getting used to learning online by default, they've changed their behavior. Therefore, by default, they're going to start learning more and more content on these online platforms, and they start getting used to taking courses. What used to be a smaller, minor activity is now becoming more mainstream. People will be used to learning online. However, let's not forget is that once people get back to their office and back to their day-to-day work, the amount of free time they have available to learn online may actually come down. So there will be people getting used to learning online on these platforms, but the focus of just learning because you're bored may come down a lot. So you may have a bump soon after the pandemic is over, but it may go down to normal, but slightly more. Enterprise learning, which is the next group of companies in EdTech, would again be companies that provide online learning for companies in a B2B model. That means they'll go to a company and say, okay, we will train here's an information platform that we can use to train your salespeople all in one company. Company will buy the lessons from them. I don't see a lot of that changing because companies are already doing that and they're providing this online education for their people. I think a lot of companies are happy to say we will just give them as much learning as they need to upgrade their skills, but not more, because we need them to spend time actually working in the company, not just, they can learn on their own time, but not necessarily extra time being given. Next generation schools, schools which are already incorporating some of the flipped classroom models I was talking about earlier. They may not get a big bump in student admissions, but I think they will benefit. At least their models become more mainstream. In fact, there will be more schools offering flipped classrooms, so therefore it's likely that these schools will face some competition because other schools are doing similar things. Tech learning on the extreme right, we have Udacity and Code Combat, which is where we're teaching students to actually build up skills in programming and technology. I think that in any case has been an uptrend swing, because what happens is that any case, as a lot of work gets automated, a lot more technology is needed to be created. There's a lot more apps being developed, a lot more business software being developed, and they all need coders for that. So therefore, there is a demand for good quality coders who understand Ruby on Rails, programs like Python and things like that, and data analytics. So there will be an upscale in tech learning, not necessarily just because of code, but generally because the future work will be more tech-enabled and they'll require more programmers and tech-enabled people. Below the bottom, the test prep guys, the guys who do tuition content, I think they're getting a big bump already. Byju's and Topper are doing very well. They're getting a lot of funding. A lot of Chinese companies are getting the same thing. So I think there's a good position for them. I think we already know. Next to that is search. That is identifying good colleges and schools to send your kid to. I don't see much change happening there, because in any case, people are using these platforms to identify good colleges and schools. Like, for example, like let's say a shiksha.com or other platforms like that. It won't get a huge jump in traffic. School administration software, again, would be like learning management systems. I think schools are already trying to move themselves to providing online flipped classroom education. So they're already going to have to deal with getting LMS systems in place. So school administration software will be there, but may not be as widespread. They won't get a huge jump because of COVID panic. Language learning, any case, is growing. In fact, China is a massive market for language learning, which I'm going to talk about later. But that's not going to be a huge jump. There will be people who want to learn English. That's going to be already there. Let's talk about next-gen study tools. Those are just basically tools that help students study, not that additionally useful. I mean, it's going to not be that useful. And again, you have the other online to offline education. Again, those are, let's say, varsity tutors would be example of online tutors in other countries, a bit like Tutor Vista, where they're teaching American students how to study. Again, not a big jump, but they'll get some benefit. So the thing is that overall, there are more or less benefits for the edtech industry. And I think when you look at this next slide, this actually maps out the education technology industry in India. Again, that's less complex than what's there internationally, because there are not as many strong LMSs or school administrative software that's really done well. But even then, the K-12 education, the test prep guys are going to do well. The online learning guys are doing well. Apps and games for kids will do okay, because that's already being used. Language learning already has that tailwind that helps it grow, because people want to learn more and more English to get into white collar. jobs. Education finance, I think, InCred and all those guys who provide student loans may have to start changing some of their models a bit, because right now, I don't know if they provide loans for online education. They may have to start looking at that, and there will be some changes in the models to some extent. Networking portals, again, not a major change. That's really more information stuff that people are looking at. Tech learning, again, is coding, which I said already, because there's a big demand over the longer term for the future of work. People are going to require coding skills, so that's going to keep on increasing. However, let's talk about something. A lot of people don't know this, but the largest education tech market in the world is China, not US. Now, you need to understand this. If you are in the education or education technology space in India, stop looking at US models. Start looking at China. And I'll tell you why. Because China and India have a few commonalities that make India more likely to be like the Chinese model than the US model. Let's talk about the Chinese model. The China's model operates huge population with a growing middle class, which India also has. The second thing is that China has a huge amount of respect for higher education, which India has. So for example, in India, if you drop a textbook on the floor, you will pick it up and you will ask for forgiveness. No other country in the world except China do people ask for forgiveness if they are seen insulting education. So India and China have a huge amount of respect for education. The third thing is that China has a few selective colleges, and they have these very, very stringent exams for thousands of kids to get into very few number of college seats. There's a Gaokao examination, which is in China, which hundreds of thousands of Chinese students take to get into the college of their choice. Same thing like in India, we have a few colleges which are high in demand, like the IIMs and the IITs and all, which thousands of kids sort of give up 2-3 years of their lives to make sure that they get into these colleges, which is why the test prep industry in India is doing well, very similar to China. So what you should really look at is that if you want to figure out what is the best strategy to follow, and I know that that information is not as easily available as the information that you get on America and the UK, but start looking at information about the Chinese education market. There's a great site called Hold On IQ, which is the guys who came up with this chart, which is quite useful in knowing about the Chinese education market or the Asian education market in general. In fact, this is just to a little more illustrate. If you look at the top 10 EdTech unicorns in the world, the top 5 are Chinese. There's only one Baiju's an Indian. There are 6 Chinese, 3 American, 1 Indian. So that shows the amount of ability that these Chinese companies have. And again, the companies like VIP Kid and iTutor Group, again, are doing similar to things like India. They're doing English language training. They're doing vocational training. They're doing test prep to some extent. So a lot of commonalities in India and China. So this is actually the latest information. So these are the venture capital funds who are very, very interested in education technology companies. In fact, as you may be seeing the buzz going along, is that of all the industries that are going to benefit out of COVID, education is going to be one of them, and EdTech has suddenly become sort of like the golden child for most of these funds. So, and you can see like these are a lot of these names. I mean, like familiar names like Bloom and Sequoia and Nexus. What's also interesting is that Omidyar Network, the third one on the list, they are what's called an impact fund. Because what is interesting is that impact fund means that they invest money, but they like to see impact. Education and healthcare are the 2 sectors where you can show impact. It's not just, let's say, if you're providing, let's say if you're like Zomato, for example, like let's say you're providing restaurant delivery services. That's a good technology model, but there's not much impact you can show. Versus saying that if you're an EdTech company, you can say there's not just the fact that I've got a great model, I'm earning money. I've actually got a lot of impact to actually share, because a lot of students have been upgraded, a lot of young people have been upgraded, and they can learn skills to actually get good jobs to upgrade themselves. So a lot of impact funds like Omidyar Network, Michael Susandel Foundation are looking at education companies to a great extent. So again, there's a lot of potential in that space. Now, let's talk about, this is my final slide before I get into Q&A. Let's talk a bit about what venture capitalists look for. The thing is that with respect to the education market. Now, obviously, the first point is that you need you're serving an unmet need in a large and growing market. I don't think anybody can argue that the Indian education market is huge. We've all heard the numbers that we have something like I think almost 500 million people under the age of 25 or 28 who will be looking at education, huge middle class. So there's definitely no question there's a huge demand in education. In fact, we are the largest market next to China for requiring education. In fact, I think we'll be growing more than China because our population is growing. Unlike China, which has, because of the one-child policy, the number of young people they have is actually reducing. Their birth rate has dropped down drastically. So we actually have the largest growing market for education in the world. So there's no question there. The second point is where you may have an issue. Now, the problem is that, let's say, for example, you are in test prep. Let's say you have to show you have a differentiated solution. What makes you different from the players? Now, let's say, for example, you say, hey, you know, I'm in the test prep market. I'm providing the best K-12 education content for kids to learn how to pass the exams. So then the VC will ask you, okay, good, but there's already Vedantu, there's already Baiju, there's already Topper. All these guys are well funded and they all have education, they all have content which has been mapped to the ICSE curriculum, CBSE curriculum, right from KG to 12 standard. What makes your product different? Now, you can't just say, yes, I'm better than Baiju. You can't say that unless you can prove it in some way. So make sure that whatever solution you're providing, remember there are a lot of EdTech players in the market. A lot of them are well funded. Make sure that whatever you're providing is validated in something. If you say you're better than Baiju's, prove it. Why? Is there a better outcome? Something you can prove, not just because you say so. The third point is customer validation of pain and gain. Now, the thing is that, and I think we know this for most industries, is that if you say that, okay, look, the customer has this problem. Let's say, for example, like for example, my company, we Ask Careers, we work in the employability space, right? So for us, we know the fact that, okay, there are a lot of graduates who are graduating who are not employable from colleges, and a lot of companies which had a lot of open jobs, I'm talking about at least a few months ago, which were looking to hire skilled graduates, but they could not find those skilled graduates. So we defined our pain as, okay, a lot of companies have a lot of open jobs and they're looking for skilled graduates, versus the pain that says, okay, the students are looking for jobs. Because a lot of people are helping students get jobs. Very few people are finding the right graduates for companies and training them. So we defined what the customer pain was. And again, the fourth thing is now today, it's not enough to have models that just burn cash left, right, and center. You have to make sure that you have a model that generates a good return on investment. You can't say, okay, look, my cost of producing this product is, let's say, 100 rupees, but I'm selling to the customer for 50 bucks and I'm losing 50 bucks per sale. That is not a model that a lot of venture capitalists are happy with anymore. The days of just burning money with unicorns has just gone, unfortunately. And of course, the last thing is that a focused team with ability to execute. Now, this is something that a lot of you guys should think of as EdTech players. I've always seen EdTech companies who basically have senior people who is, let's say, one guy or one girl who is the entrepreneur, let's say the visionary, the marketing person, and one person who is the tech genius, the CTO, the person who's created the product. I always ask them, okay, who's the academic in your senior team? And more often than not, they don't have an academic in their senior team, which is why a lot of times when EdTech companies were trying to sell to schools and colleges, because they didn't understand the customer mindset, what schools were looking for, what the colleges were looking for, because there had no academic in their team who actually understood their mindset, they were not able to sell very effectively. So therefore, whenever you have a product that you're trying to sell or trying to come up with a model, make sure that your team has got the skill sets that are needed, not just in terms of technology and financial skills, but academic skills or something that is relevant to the EdTech industry.
So the first question is from Anjali. She says, how do you think that Indian K-12 system will adapt to the use of technology when the percentage of students using technology after school is only 12% according to your previous stream? American schools provide tablets to all the students in most school districts. Does Indian schools have that ability, according to you?
Correct. So obviously, you're absolutely right. The thing is that if you ask me today, do they have ability? I would say no, obviously, probably 50%, especially the rural schools and the ones which are the budget schools may have a tough time providing technology. But also you need to understand is that because they're going to be forced to move towards adapting technology, they will find ways to adapt to it. So for example, like you may have either, if we're lucky, the government subsidizes technology for the students. You may have NGOs who are providing tablets and smartphones for the kids. But also don't forget is that the cost of data has dropped down drastically. The cost of smartphones has dropped down drastically. Funnily is that if you walk into, and again, it may sound a little critical, the slum area, you will actually walk into slum area, maybe people who don't have toilets, they have a common toilet, but they all have cable connections. So trust me, people will adapt to technology. It will happen. It may not be easy, it'll be painful, but they will adapt to technology. They'll find a way to get it.
So the next question is, you talked about flipped classrooms. It's not yet a concept introduced in Indian K-12 and higher education system. Even in American universities, it's not yet widely accepted, and most faculty is not prepared to flip the classroom. What are your views on that?
Well, I think my first view is that all these people who thought that faculty can't change would have to sort of eat their hats, because all these faculty have started using Zoom classrooms. And I know that because, for example, we're on the board of 24 colleges, which have been Bombay University driven colleges, traditional education, chalk and talk lecture model, been there since 1950s. Majority of faculty have adapted to Zoom and are doing online classes. So that whole excuse of saying that schools cannot adapt, faculty cannot adapt, I think throw that out the window. Because the thing is that the schools, majority of schools have adapted, some better than others, but that mindset or that mental barrier that they can't adapt, I think has gone out the window. Today, we ourselves are adapting to Zoom. I mean, how many of you were on Zoom, let's say 1 year ago? How many people were going on webinars 1 year ago? Suddenly it's all happened. So new normal, new habits.
Great. So the next question is, what's your take on home tuition platform where students can learn on live videos and in vernacular languages? Target audience are school children of standard 5th to 10th, studying in tier 2 or tier 3 cities, learning in vernacular languages.
Okay, so as I said, the thing is that when you're looking at home tuitions for vernacular languages, now the thing is that there are a lot of ideas out there. In fact, this is not the first time I've heard that idea. There are people providing home tuitions in vernacular languages. Vernacular is actually one of the big untapped spaces in India, not as competitive. So whoever's asked that question, if you're asking in terms of their own business model, you probably need to make sure that you map out the market and say, okay, like the vernacular language market for 5th to 12th standard kids, how huge is it? Who are the other players? And why is my product better than what's out there? Like what all VCs look for. But also don't forget is that unlike, let's say Facebook or Google, where the last man standing or one size fits all, and basically the biggest guy gets 80% of the market, education is a very fragmented market. So even if you look at, let's say, even the biggest player, like let's say Byju's, still has a small component of the market. It doesn't dominate India. So everybody will have space. If you're better at selling and you have a differentiated product, you can make money in any model.
Right. So the next question is, can you please throw some light about foreign education industry? How are parents thinking now? Will they send abroad for higher education? Anybody into education abroad, can you please help us understand how this industry will progress?
Well, the funny thing is that like a lot of the education industry, most of the colleges abroad are panicking, right? Because they're saying that there are two things right now. So okay, let's walk through this, right? If you are a Harvard and one of the top 10 colleges, you know for a fact you will get people applying, because if you get your kid to Harvard or MIT, you're done. I mean, like this, you're not going to say, okay, I'm not going to join Harvard because it's online for the first semester, right? So they're fine. The mid-tier guys, the guys who used to depend on foreign students coming in, are having a tough time. Why? Because what's happening is that, okay, if you're so like a lot of kids used to go to mid-tier colleges in Australia, UK, Canada, because they knew that there was a chance of getting a job in that country, and they said, we'll just take any college. Most of those colleges had to subsidize the fees for their own students in the UK or Canada, and used to get highly inflated fees from the Indian students, the Chinese students, that used to fund their operations, right? Now that these foreign students are not coming in, these people are short of money. So what all of them are doing, they're now actually rolling out and offering courses online. So suddenly you're going to see a lot of these international universities, the mid-tier ones, trying to get students in their home countries through online education. But the problem is that for a lot of students, they say is that, okay, maybe I'll defer a year. Maybe instead of me actually paying the money for this year, let me take a break. Let me take a gap year. Let me do some internship or something like that. And then just join next year when at least I get the college experience, then I'm paying a huge amount of money. At that point, things may stabilize a bit. So yeah, temporary disruption, but finally people have to go to college. See, one thing to remember is that in school and college, people do not give up their education. You will not say, I will give up college because the coronavirus. At some point, you'll have to do college, right? There you go.
Right. So the next question is, can you tell the steps to convert our college physical classrooms to online classrooms, and how much time will it take, according to you?
I think the question is really based on the mindset of the trustee or the owner of the college. The thing is that if the person wants to go slow and steady, it could take too long. If the person is proactive, it could take a week. Because frankly speaking, like, again, we've done this in our own colleges, right? All you have to do is download a paid version of Zoom, get your teachers to start sending out Zoom invites to all your students, get your teachers to start creating WhatsApp groups for each class to start asking questions, get onto Google Classroom, which is a free platform where you can send assignments and stuff. All the software is there, and most of it is free or incredibly cheap. It's just your mindset and willingness to get your people to do it. So it's 1 week or 1 year or never. Up to you.
So I guess we'll just take the last question now because of the shortage of time. So the last question is, most learning softwares that are there are of tutoring models such as Byju's and Vedantu. Do you know any softwares that are bringing teachers and students on the same platform?
When you say bringing teachers and students on the same platform, that really means in terms of for what purpose, right? So if you're talking about, let's say, tutoring, like for example, if a student wants to log in and gets a live tutor, there are plenty of platforms. Any online platform which has teachers teaching you through synchronous or asynchronous learning is a platform. It's quite crowded, but the biggest player in India right now, the most funded guy, is Unacademy, which provides teachers providing teaching videos to students. But again, back to the original point is that unless you have a model that's differentiated from these guys, you'll have a tough time raising money.